Have you ever found yourself reacting to a situation in the same way over and over again, even when you know it doesn't serve you? Maybe it's a familiar feeling of frustration in traffic, or perhaps it's the way you withdraw during a conflict with a loved one. You tell yourself you'll handle it differently next time, but when the moment comes, you're stuck in the same reaction. Why does this happen? Our brain is like a highly complex network of roads, constantly building and reinforcing the routes we take the most. Every time we repeat a behavior or react with a specific emotion, our brain strengthens the neural pathways associated with that response. Think of it like walking the same path in the woods over and over. Eventually, that path becomes well worn, easier to follow and harder to deviate from. These neurological pathways become our brain's default settings for how we navigate life. Repeated experiences, especially emotional and behavioral responses, form the foundation of these pathways. For example, if you consistently react to stress with anxiety, your brain learns to activate the anxiety response whenever you encounter a stressful situation. The more you repeat this cycle, the stronger the pathway becomes, making it the automatic route your brain takes whenever stress arises. The same goes for patterns of thought like self-doubt or procrastination. Once those circuits are established, it becomes second nature to default to those responses, even if you consciously want to change. If you've ever tried to break a habit, you know how challenging it can be. It's not just about willpower, there's a biological reason behind the struggle. These deeply ingrained neurological pathways are efficient, saving the brain time and energy by automatically triggering familiar responses. While this is helpful for certain tasks like brushing your teeth or driving a car, it becomes problematic when the behaviors we're reinforcing aren't aligned with the person we want to be. In a sense, we become prisoners of our own brain's efficiency. Our repeated emotional and behavioral patterns take the wheel, and we find ourselves reacting without fully engaging our conscious mind. It's like being on autopilot, where we're no longer choosing how to respond, but instead simply following the path of least resistance. What's fascinating is how emotions play a significant role in reinforcing these neurological pathways. Emotions like fear, anger, or even excitement have a way of cementing themselves in our brain's wiring. When we experience an emotion intensely and repeatedly in specific situations, our brain starts to associate that emotion with the situation. For instance, if we've felt fear in a social setting multiple times, our brain wires itself to expect fear whenever we're in similar settings, regardless of whether the present moment justifies that emotion. This is why certain emotional triggers can feel overwhelming. Our brain has built a shortcut between the trigger and the emotional response. We might want to respond differently, but the well-worn path of that neural circuit pulls us into the same emotion every time. Our habitual emotional and behavioral patterns don't just influence our reactions, they shape how we perceive the world. If your brain is wired to experience stress in specific situations, your perception of those situations becomes tinted by that stress. It's like wearing colored glasses. Everything you see is filtered through the emotional lens your brain has created. For example, someone who has wired their brain to experience anxiety in social situations might perceive harmless interactions as threatening. The brain, through its established pathways, influences how the person interprets body language, tone, and even their own self-worth in that moment. The pathway has been reinforced so many times that it becomes the primary way that person experiences social encounters. It's no surprise then that changing habitual behavior requires more than a simple decision. Even if you consciously want to alter a reaction, like staying calm instead of getting angry, your brain's wiring is set up to default to the old behavior. This is why change can feel like an uphill battle. You're not just changing your mindset, you're working against a well-established neurological system. What makes change even more complex is that these patterns are often reinforced unconsciously. We may not realize we're repeating the same emotional responses or behaviors until we reflect on our actions. By then, the pathway has already run its course. It's like catching yourself after the fact and wondering, why did I react that way again? If these pathways are automatic, what hope do we have for change? While our brain's wiring is strong, it's not unchangeable. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and pathways, gives us the potential to reshape how we respond to life. But this doesn't happen by accident. It requires conscious, sustained effort. Conscious intervention, the deliberate act of noticing and redirecting our automatic patterns, is the key to rewiring our brain. However, because our default pathways are so deeply ingrained, it takes consistent awareness and intention to shift them. It's like forging a new path in the woods. It's hard work at first, but over time, the new route becomes easier to follow and the old one starts to fade. Awareness is the critical first step in changing these patterns because we can't change what we don't notice. Without awareness, our brain continues to default to its old habits, and we remain stuck in the same cycles of behavior and emotion. By becoming aware of our habitual reactions, we create a moment of pause, a space in which we can choose to act differently. But this awareness alone isn't enough. It's only the beginning. Once we recognize the patterns, we need to train our brain to take a different path. This is where conscious, repeated practice comes in. The more we practice new behaviors and emotional responses, the more we strengthen new neural pathways. Over time, these new pathways become the default. As we begin to build new pathways, our experience of life starts to shift. We no longer feel like we're on autopilot, reacting the same way to every situation. Instead, we gain the ability to respond intentionally, choosing emotions and behaviors that align with who we want to be. The brain's plasticity gives us the power to reshape our internal experience, which in turn transforms how we engage with the world. The journey to rewire our brain is one of self-mastery. It's about reclaiming the steering wheel of our mind and learning how to consciously guide our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. While the road may be challenging, the destination is worth it. A life where our responses reflect our deepest values and desires rather than our automatic habits. The Inner Foundation series offers training specifically designed to help rewire these deep emotional and behavioral patterns. Whether it's overcoming emotional overwhelm or creating new responses, these courses guide you through the process of conscious transformation.